There, all right.
Yeah, I can cut this
Here comes
crap out.
Brad, yeah.
Oh, here we are again with Brian. Today we're going to talk about Givens and Druthers. So Brian will take it from here, and it may not be as fun as some of the other videos we're talking about, but it's going to be very informative. So here we go.
Givens and Druthers is a planning exercise. So, and in short, Givens are your constraints. Druthers are the things you would like to do in those constraints. And those druthers actually define the purpose of the layout that you want to build, you want to design, so that you can, when you actually do your design, you've thought about the things that actually will make this layout as close as possible meet your needs and desires. So that's why we do the Givens and Druthers exercise. The guy that invented this, or invented, probably a bad word, but the guy who popularized Givens and Druthers was John Armstrong. And I have a Givens and Druthers questionnaire that expounds a little bit more on what he had, that I use when I do layout designs for folks. And we've actually screenshot the pages so that Fred can post this up after we get done with a couple of definitions. So be ready for that, so you can stop your tablet and quick screenshot this stuff. Feel free to use it, feel free to copy it, feel free to send it around to your friends. If you publish it and you remember to put say that you got it from me, that's fine. If not, I really don't care, for the simple reason that, this is meant to be used and passed around, and use it as you see fit. This isn't holy writ or anything like that. It's meant to be used and passed around. It's not meant to be possessed. So feel free to do with this as you see fit. As a matter of fact, I think I even wrote that on the last page just to satisfy the copyright lawyer people. Let's do a couple definitions first. First thing, right off the bat, track planning and layout design are two different things. They are. Track planning is a subset of layout design. Track planning is where your trackage goes, how it fits into your space. Layout design is all-encompassing. Your aisle widths, your style. Is it operations-oriented? Is it a piece of art? Is it a photography platform? Is it mountainous? Is it flatland? Is it rural? Is it urban? Whatever. Your space, how it's treated. You put drop ceilings in, plenty of light, all those sorts of things. That's part of layout design, but it's not part of track planning. So bear in mind, track planning is a subset of layout design. Though Givens and Druthers will do a lot, we'll talk a lot about track planning. So let's talk about a couple of things. One of the most important dimensions that you're going to need is a minimum radius. Is it the most important one that you're going to use for planning purposes? Not necessarily, and I'll show you in a minute. A minimum radius basically is, okay, what is the radius, for instance, of this track here? And is this the closest one, the tightest one? Minimum radius is dictated by, of course, your space. It's dictated by your equipment. Does your equipment mechanically go around some tightness of curvature? The sort of insidious thing that most people don't talk about, though, is there's also a visual ridiculousness factor in minimum radius when you're choosing it, too, because, yeah, it might go around that curve, but it looks just stupid when it's doing it.
Yep.
Okay? And that's important to you. So, especially as you're doing this thing in a manner of a showpiece or a piece of art, because then you want your equipment to look at its best. So visual ridiculousness for you may differ from visual ridiculousness.
That too. Yeah, exactly.
Visual ridiculousness may vary between what you find ludicrous and what another guy finds ludicrous. A little arbitrary. More importantly as a dimension, though, is going to be something called constraining radius. People don't talk about it very much. I don't even know if you've ever heard the term in the SIG, coming out of the SIG people, but I'm going to throw it at you anyways. Let's say that this radius right here. Now this is O, and this is actually my minimum, laid to my minimum radius on this layout. Okay, and this is 54-inch radius. Our track spacings in O are 4 inches. You guys in HO are like, maybe 30-inch radius might be a minimum radius you choose, and your track spacings are 2.5, usually something in that ballpark. And so, but the style of math is the same. If this is 54 inches, this is going to be 58, and this is what you're designing to, is that 58 inches. That's your constraining radius, because you're doing this as a double track railroad. Again, that comes to some choices that you've made that will define it. Your minimum radius can be your constraining radius on a single track railroad. Your constraining radius could be, if you're, for instance, using a helix or using hidden staging with 4 tracks across it or something like that, it's going to be 54 plus 4 is 58, plus 4 is 62, plus 4 is 66. And you can see how that, as that increases, that's constraining your design. Next definition, the thing called the blob. This is a John Armstrong term.
That's not one of those science fiction movies.
No, it isn't. Well, actually, it could be. The blob that ate the cellar.
Okay, there you go.
Because the blob is defined as trackage going from here to where it comes back to 180 degrees over on the other side. The area that takes up in one complete half circle is a blob.
Gotcha.
Okay? The blob in it of itself, the size of it, the area of it, is defined by constraining radius, not minimum. As you can see why now constraining radius is important in this. Then we have the mother blob, which is really important to you guys that are building to linear design, because that's the reverse loop, where it comes around and then comes back down like this to where the tracks are alongside each other. The reason it is because you got a blob here, then you have a half one, and then another half one, and they're also growing in this direction as they are growing in this direction. Which is why John always defines something called the square, which is a half a blob, turning 90 degrees.
Gotcha.
Because that form, relayed, then all of a sudden starts defining the area you're going to need for that reverse loop. Layout types are next in this definition thing. The largest and most common in the US, the one that you read about all the time, is linear design. Hidden staging on the other end, big scene in the middle, some sort of section violence happens in there. It's the classic Ellison stage thing. Wing, the stage where the play happens, the other wing. Linear design space intensive because you're turning 2 sets of those mother blobs in there somewheres to turn your trains back around and send them back out into the scene again. On the opposite end of the scale is the shelf layout, the single scene switcher, whatever you want to call that, the diorama layout. It's, something in the form of, usually a passing siding with sidings and that sort of thing. It's very common in the UK. This section of this layout that you'll see coming across here would be a classic single scene switcher or shelf layout. A little bit larger than most, but you get the point. And in the middle of the two is nodal design, which we dealt with in another video, and that's basically taking dioramas or shelf, the shelf design, the single scene switcher, and stringing them together. Each one has got a discrete purpose. This layout is done in normal design simply because I can't turn a mother blob without taking up half of my available space. That's one of the things we will learn in Givens and Druthers, which is now where we're going to go.
Okay.
I've said before, givens are absolutes. These are your constraints. There's three major ones and then a couple more that we'll touch on. First, you have to come to terms with these three major ones, and those three major ones are your space, your scale, and your prototype and era. When we're talking about space, not only you're talking about the area that you have to work in, you need to really think in three dimensions. The height comes into this. The style of layout that you build, for instance, I have low ceiling heights, double decking doesn't really work for me. You need to be able to define that thing. Not only you need to know your space as far as its area or its volume, but you need to know the features of the space that you have to accommodate. Where are your entrances? Like in my case, right over there, which makes life a little bit difficult because you're entering from the side. Unless you want duck unders or a lift out, you need to know that. There's another one that's over on the other side, directly opposite. Are you accommodating other things in this space? Like children and Barney, or a laundry, the facilities of the house. By the way, when you're designing a layout, think about this one. If you got a hot water heater and a furnace, someday you're going to want to get those things out of there. Design your layouts to where you got egress. If you need to have egress through that space for a dead hot water heater and a plumber bringing in a new one, you better give them the room to do it, or else it's really going to be an ugly exercise. You're going to be tearing down layout and you're not going to like it. So, the features of the space, the other uses of the space, its physical dimensions in three dimensions. Those are define your space. Probably one of the first things you want to know is whether you can turn blobs and reverse loops in the space you have. If you can, that dictates layout style. As far as getting, the...
I know what happened. Good.
Just shut off?
Yeah, I might want to go back just a little bit.
Okay. You'll want to... I'm not one of these people that is interested in getting absolutely the most operation in space, especially at the expense of moving around or that sort of thing. I'm much more interested in comfort, being able to move in the space, people being able to do their work, that sort of thing. Being able to back off a little bit to take photographs, kind of an important thing to the photograph platform people. So understand that about what you're putting in the space. Prototype and era have a very, very important effect on minimum radius and constraining radius. If you're running auto racks or Pullmans, it has an effect on your minimum radius that you can mechanically turn. It has an effect on the ridiculousness of those things turning that radius. The thing about the prototype is it also will define, for instance, if you're doing the Penzi going over the Alleghenies, yours is 4 tracks wide. Your constraining radius is that 4-track problem we mapped out a little bit earlier. So that's something that you need to understand. And the last one is your scale, of course. My minimum radius in O is roughly twice what yours might be in HO, roughly 4 times what yours would be in N. Not counting some of the other things like, the unscalable things like aisles and stuff. But that minimum radius that you're working with is defined by your scale. The other thing is defined by scale is how high you need to get a track to put it over top of another track, which defines now the length of a grade. Grades don't scale. 2% is 2% is 2%. But the distance you have to maintain that grade does scale because you have to get higher in O to get over top of a train underneath than you do in HO to get a train over top of another one. That has effect on how long you're maintaining that 2%. Scale has a thing. Now, if you can't build that prototype in that scale in your space, this is where it's time to come to Jesus here. Because these 3 you have to sit down and think about before you go any further. And you really have to get this all 3 of these brought into some sort of concert here. If you're going to model the Penzi and you're going to do it in O, and the space isn't big enough, you're going to dig. Or you're going to change scale and do it in HO. Or you're going to change prototype and era and say do the bald eagle branch rather than the 4-track main up and around Horseshoe Curve. Now's a good time to deal with that rather than after you start slinging sticks around and go, wait a minute, this is just not quite going to fit. It's not going to work. Those 3 are the big are the 3 major ones.
You also have to consider if you go steam, there's whole different maintenance facilities required for that. Turning steam engines, maintaining steam engines, because turntables and roundhouses take up a ton of space. And if you want to turn and you're putting a Y in, you sort of have the same problem. That takes up a fair amount of space also.
Well, we can go wander off of that one for a few minutes, just for fun. Steam. Yeah, steam is going to be more space intensive to a degree. There are tricks to maintain to doing that, by the way, that the real railroads have pulled too, where they may not have the sort of square area to put a roundhouse in and a turntable and approach it in the traditional way. But for instance, in New England, very often what you'll do is you'll see, oh, I should draw it. I'll just wave my arms around and hope the description gets by. Rather than the lead coming into the turntable, and then the turntable be here, and the roundhouse be here, which is what model railroaders classically do. If you have the lead coming in alongside the roundhouse to the table pin, and then spinning around and you're coming back into there, what you've done is you've turned around and have the length that you need for this form by adding a little bit of width. Ys, there's something called a scissors Y, where rather than base, turn out, You have base, which are shoving these two in, and they're going through a crossing, and then bowing around like that to a turnout. It still functions as a Y. It's going to be longer this way. It's not going to be this wide this way. So there are ways of getting clever with track forms. Yeah, era though has a lot to do with this. Bidirectionalism of motive power. Don't be afraid to run things like mics and smaller in both directions. But yeah, you know, a Niagara going backwards, maybe pushing it a little bit. Let's sort of move along on things that are kind of associated. So let's get off on it. Actually, Fred mentioned, you know, steam and diesel as for instance, is something that comes in here, and what comes with it, which sort of gets us into, and I'll take this into a little bit of a different order than what's on the piece of paper. What another given, but this is this is after you've rationalized those three very important ones. Let's talk about a couple more that come into this that then become things that you want to think about. One of them is what I sort of call it the specialty things. I think if my memory serves me right on this thing. As a matter of fact, I'm going to look at this piece of paper for just a second. Special considerations, I call it. It's two ways around. Special considerations are things bizarre things that you just have to have. Like for a long time, for several layouts down in here, I had an 8-foot long O-scale model of a Fletcher class destroyer. I just had to have that in there as a scenery. So I'm always building a port scene with this thing sitting there. It looked very cool. It was a special thing I had to have. So if you've got some beautiful diorama of the Oakland mole that you bought at some NMRA meet somewhere and you just have to have it, well, no, you got to design that in there. And that is actually a given. The opposite side of the coin is the things that you absolutely loathe. If you model the Penzi, but everybody does horseshoe curve and you just don't want horseshoe curve, then know that you know whatever it is that you're going to design into this excludes that, and that's an important exclusion just as much as something that some diorama or something that you want to fit in is an important inclusion. Know those inclusions and exclusions. Another one that's kind of important, and like I say, you'll look at these. You look at this outline, and you'll see stuff that we're not necessarily talking about, and we'll talk about some stuff that might not be on there. That's kind of the beauty of this. This is a very sort of this is kind of a free flow thing. Givens and Druthers. It's just to get you to think, not to tell you exactly what to do, but just to get you to think. But one thing that's important is time and treasure, I call it. How much time do you have in a particular, like say you're on a 5-year appointment someplace and you're going to build a layout, you're going to be there for 5 years, but you don't want to just have the sticks up when you have to move. Your longevity, be honest about it. If you're 80, are you starting to lay track? Scale it back so you can get to the running bit. Treasure is kind of obvious. How much can you afford to put into this? It's an important one, especially if you've got a wife and family responsibilities and that sort of thing like that. You got to factor that sort of thing in there. Another important thing about time that most people don't think about, which we'll touch on again in a little while, is the time it takes to build this thing is not necessarily the only time sink. There's a time. How much time does it take to maintain it? How complicated is it to maintain? How much time do you want to put into maintaining it? Your own condition. I got back issues. I don't do duck unders. So obviously duck unders aren't designed. Other people, yeah, if you're very flexible, then certainly is a viable design option. Double decking, same way. But consider your condition. Consider the conditions of others if you're going to have this sort of on public view. If it's designed, and these are the sorts of things that we're talking about givens. And once again, givens are the constraints, not necessarily your desires and wishes and wants. These are the constraints that you're working with. So be honest, especially with the givens. That way you're not designing yourself into a box.
Right. And the block could be a helix if you use double deck.
Oh, yeah.
They take up
the
a fair amount of
helix.
space. Yes.
A word about helixes, shall we then? Okay. Here's the thing about helixes that a helix is not something to be dismissed lightly because it combines two problems. One, it combines a constraining radius problem, not a minimum radius problem, but a constraining radius problem. Because if you have a 4-track helix that is doing your staging, then that's a constraining radius problem. The other problem is that you've got to turn around and do a little bit of geometry, a little bit of math that involves pi, and we're not talking about what you're shoving in your pile, because you have to get a length of run to be able to put that track over top of itself at a proper height or better. You have to do that calculation, that grade calculation, and how long that grade must be maintained before you get that train goes over top.
Squared.
I'm sorry?
Pi times the radius squared. Gives you
Pi r
circumference.
squared. Actually, pi r round, cake r squared.
Yes.
But
Either way.
enough of the really old, stupid jokes that date back to the 1920s. Please.
Yeah.
But that's the thing about a helix. A helix is a useful form. It's a space eater.
Oh yes.
Ooh, because, like I say, that run that you have to achieve by turning that first loop in order to get the height that you need might well be larger in diameter than twice your constraining radius.
Correct.
All right,